What have you been up to all day?
I have been polishing, port matching the magnesium manifold that I'm going to put on my Honda Ridgeline. I can't tune it, so I wanted to do something else to try to make some more power. So these are from an Acura MDX. You can get them, I think this was a 2016. It's the same, almost the same exact design as the factory plastic manifold on the Ridgeline. The difference is this is a clamshell, so I can get to every inch of the runners, and it should be an identical bolt-on part as long as I have the bottom. So there's an upper manifold and a lower manifold, and the upper is 2-piece. So I'm gonna have to swap out the lower intake manifold, which these go straight onto the cylinder head. When I got this, these ports right here are from the factory are significantly bigger than the factory intake manifold ports here. So I'm port matched these to this, and then I polished the runners all the way up. So now we should have a perfectly good smooth flow. Might gain a little bit more power. I found this out from a guy on a forum who did not know how to use punctuation, but other than that, I mean, that was a genius idea, and I'm glad I found it. I'm glad he did it, and I'm gonna put this on the truck and see how it does. But first I gotta get all the old silicone off and seal it back up, because it's basically held together with goop silicone. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Randy Billy Garage. So today I have a real quick one, but I want to make this video so bad that I'm just starting on it during the middle of the week. So this is my 2021 Honda Ridgeline. I want to show you guys an upgrade. At least I'm hoping it's an upgrade. I won't know until I'm done with it. It's pretty much the only option that I have for hopefully changing the power output on my direct injection J-Series modern Honda V6. Without getting into the specifics of the Honda V6s, I can't tune this truck right now. It's just not available. It's not an option on the aftermarket right now. But what I can do is I can change the intake manifold. So I found out from a message board that one guy had tried this. Unfortunately, it was hard to read his post. It was very short and there weren't a lot of comments, but he did give me the idea for it, and I got to give him credit. And I will post that guy's username. You guys can figure out the forum, whatever. The big main difference, and I'll show you here in a second, between this manifold and the manifold that's in my truck is the one that's in my truck is plastic, and the one that came off of the 2014 to 2020 third generation Acura MDX is magnesium. Now I know what you're thinking. You're swapping a plastic manifold for a magnesium manifold? Yes. The big thing is I'm not quite as worried about the temperature of the air going in the engine as I am worried about how smooth the flow is and the diameter of the runners and the things that really affect the power band. So I'm doing it as an experiment. It's a jump start for me to see if this is going to make a difference. And also I got an idea that I might be able to put an intake manifold spacer. That might be a future project, but for right now, let's dive into it. I'm going to show you guys what we're working with, and hopefully this will go pretty quick and without any issues. All right, so for those of you that don't know anything about Honda V6s, this is a J35 Y6. This is the engine that came after, in chronological order, of the J35 Y5 that this manifold came off of. Now, it didn't look like this. This I have taken and I have polished. This is from that 2014 and up Acura MDX. This is the factory manifold on the J35 Y6 that is actually still on that truck. I bought a second one for thinking I could put it on my Miata with my J-swap, but that didn't work. So I've got it here for reference. So this is plastic. It's very simple. There's also a spot on this one where the EGR comes up through the lower manifold. Bolts there. As with this one, you have to get the lower manifold with the upper if you're going to try this. So the short of what I've done is I ordered these two separate. That's the upper, this is the lower. I then measured this lower and I immediately started comparing it to the ports that are on the bottom side of this factory manifold, which are a little bit skinnier towards the bottom, but they're actually wider towards the top. But overall they are skinnier by about 2 millimeters all the way across. So I did no modifications to this lower manifold. I held this manifold up to the upper, and I noticed all the way around, and I'll show you guys a picture right here. I noticed all the way around there was ridges on every single one of these. They were not port matched, and the upper was smaller than the lower, which that got on my nerves, and I thought, well, that might be a power gain right there. I might be able to just smooth some flow. It might hurt me. It might take away my bottom end, but either way, I wanted to try it. So the cool thing about these is that this is a clamshell. There's 10 millimeter bolts all the way around it. You're actually looking at the bottom of it right now. But I took it apart very carefully by prying it until all of the, it's silicone sealant, just regular silicone sealant, whatever Honda used. And then I got all of the silicone off, and what I initially did was I put this up to this with bolts on the two studs to hold it together, and I went in. So this lower manifold was sitting like this. You'll notice those ports are different. Those ports are the ones that go to the head. And I looked down into there, and I was able to see and mark using a very long, skinny, slightly angled pick. I was able to score all the way around on this surface all the way around. So once I had that mark scored on there, which is essentially matching up this port size to this port size, then what I did was I took a Dremel, and I've got aluminum carbide bits. So I've got these aluminum, so they're going to be listed as non-ferrous. These are aluminum 1/4 inch carbide bits. I use those for taking away most of the material. I use a small sanding wheel on a Dremel to actually do all the polishing. And I removed a little bit more material on the insides of each of these to get a little bit straighter airflow going through this manifold and to open it up a little bit. So, porting aside, I am ready to take this apart and see if I have everything I need right now to put this lower manifold on with this upper manifold and hook it all back together. So just like any other new car, you're going to have this big weird cover, and it is held on by 4 little things that pop in to the rubber grommets. Go ahead and just pop that off. This is your EGR pipe. It's going to be 4 10 millimeters and 2 12 millimeters on a deep well. So I'm going to start with the 2 12 millimeters down here. I like to get a magnet, so 2 12 millimeter nuts. And you're going to switch, go to your 10 millimeter. 4 10 millimeters, this comes out. There is no gasket on the bottom of this. It is still going to be on the studs down there. These rubber gaskets are somewhat loose, but they will stay in the manifold. Now I'm going to start unplugging everything that I can, but I want to get this Christmas tree out of the way. It's only got 2 tangs on it. Push those in. It should come right out of there. Don't forget to hook that back up, because that controls your throttle body. So this right here, this is for your PCV. It actually runs to all 6 of the cylinders right here, and then it hooks down here to your front valve cover. Make sure while you're doing this you don't drop anything in those giant holes if you plan on putting it back on there. Alright, so I'm going to take that off gently, because this is plastic. Break this loose by going back and forth like that. Should be able to just slide it right off of there, and then also pull it out of the plastic that's part of the manifold. Okay, so I know I'm gonna need, I think it's a 6. Just kidding, that is a 5.5. Just gonna run that off a little bit. I don't need to run it all the way out. It's just gotta be able to let this come off. Another thing I want to do is pop this air box off, so that I have a little bit more room to wiggle this. I don't know if this has ever been off of here. Okay, so I do have the room now. So I'm guessing those are going to be 12 millimeters. Yes, 12 mil. Honda likes their 12 mils. for 12 millimeters. The throttle body, careful not to lose your bolts. Throttle body should come off now. However, it is still attached with two coolant tubes. So I'm going to leave it right here for now. Now we need to take this brake booster thing off of here. Take your brake booster line loose and let it dangle as well. So now for the upper intake manifold, there's going to be looks like 6 12 millimeter bolts, 4 bolts, 2 nuts for the studs, and that should be it. And don't mess up, your throttle body bolts are very slightly shorter than your intake manifold bolts. So I'm going to put those in a separate spot. Now I should be able to pick this up. It is still attached. So the one last spot that it's attached is right here for your evap stuff. 8 millimeter for your evap. 2 8 millimeters actually. So those 2 8 millimeters are off. My evap has been removed from the manifold, and the manifold comes out. I'm gonna flip this over here, so I'm not dumping stuff into my intake. Make sure you don't forget about any of those seals like that one that's still sitting there. That was easy. That's about as easy as I thought it would be. So don't forget to put this back. All right, so I've done my due diligence and I have checked down and looked at these valves. This is a direct injection engine. The later model J series like this are direct injection. Because of that, you want to take a look at your valves and see how dirty they are, because direct injection engines have issues where carbon will build up on the valves. This being a 2021, they're actually not that bad, but they also haven't had a lot of time to have problems. But all that being said, I'm going to remove the lower manifold. First I'll take this EGR gasket off of here. So now I'm going to remove all the bolts that hold this in, and it should come right out. Those also are 12 millimeter bolts and a couple of 12 millimeter nuts. I'm going to take the nuts off first so that I don't lose them. And again, I'm going to keep these separate from the upper intake manifold. That one is also a nut, so there are actually 4 12 millimeter nuts, and then 5 bolts. And these bolts are somewhat short currently. That makes me concerned. Oh, they'll work on the new ones. Now we're going to pull this up. Hope that we don't knock any dirt or anything into those ports. Now, that's off of there. Theoretically, that is not going back on. Make sure that the new piece that you put on is oriented correctly. And of course, make sure that you have the gaskets you need and that you don't pinch anything. Very carefully. It looks like that went down just right. I want to try to make sure that the gasket that's in there is pulled to one side. Okay. Hey, Billy's here.
Your car's coming apart.
It's not a car.
Your truck's coming apart.
Thank you. Yep. Well, now it's going back together.
With the new stuff?
Yep.
Cool.
Billy is currently making us, or has possibly made us,
It is, yes, the food time.
food. So, I just got the lower intake manifold on there. Those ports are way different than these. This is the one that came off.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how much bigger those are.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like this whole extra size. They're like a 1/2 inch diameter different.
Is this the same gasket you've had on there? Like the one that came from the factory?
So the plastic one doesn't have this. Luckily it was included with the one I ordered. The lower gaskets are the same. That gasket's still good. Do I know the torque? No. Do I know the torque for a 13 millimeter bolt? Yeah, 23 Newton meters. Yep, so in total you've got 9 bolts. So now I want to transfer this. Now that I can get to it, I gotta get the clamp off of it, transfer it to the new manifold. Don't forget your evap and don't forget to hook it back up or you will get check engine light. I should be able to put the new manifold back on. Alright, so hook up your evap. Don't forget to slide your clamp up on it. Now, this is on here. Before I torque anything, I want to make sure everything else is going to fit. So this is in the same exact spot. This is our brake booster. Slide that clamp up on it, so don't forget that. This right here, you'll note that this right here goes all the way through. And then there's this other barb. There was a cover. If you get the cover with it and you want to use it, that's up to you. I like the look of the runners. So we're just ignoring this. We're leaving the cover off. I'm going to run this straight to here. There is nothing to put it into right here. So it's just going to go on. And we're just going to put that little hose clamp back on it. So I actually am missing 2 bolts because there are more bolts on this lower than there were on the other manifold. So these bolts are actually a little bit longer in some spots. Alright, I gotta figure out some hardware real quick. So, pro tip, you're not gonna have the right hardware in the right spots for this. So, luckily, my manifold, the 4 bolts that hold the throttle body on, well, the 4 studs that hold the throttle body on, it came with 2 on the bottom. Those studs ended up working to hold the throttle body on. The throttle body bolts being shorter, I took all 4 of the throttle body bolts and swapped them over here. And then for these bolts, which were longer in the other manifold, we have enough room, since these aren't captive, to run these through on the top of this throttle body. So I used 2 of the longer bolts that were originally holding the manifold in on the other manifold for the throttle body. And then I put the original studs and the original nuts back in down here. So that gives me 4 of the shorter throttle body bolts. And then what I was able to do, obviously we had the studs that came on the lower manifold originally, but what I've got now is I've got the other 2 studs that came on the other lower manifold. So I've got 4 studs, and what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 studs and 4 bolts. And none of them should bottom out or have any issues. So all you have to do is thread the studs in, and if they don't thread in all the way, you just run the nut down until it hits that spot, because we've got more than enough threads, except on this one. Alright guys, so after a little bit of playing around, I was able to get some washers that are meant for, what are those, M8 bolts?
Yeah, or something like that.
These bolts. So I was able to put those under there to have something to actually push the manifold down when we torque it. So you'll have to play around with some hardware. Just make sure you're not torquing something that's not actually pressing down. Make sure it's not too long. If all else fails, you can take one of these longer bolts from the other manifold that are too long, put a nut on here, chop off about 1/4 inch, and then run the nut back off. Clean it up. Should work just fine. So we're gonna go ahead and torque these down and double check everything. Check all our sensors, make sure everything's good to go, and then see if she starts up all right. And everybody, don't forget, this is one of the most important sensors in your engine. This is your map sensor. It's held in with a Phillips. It was on the old manifold. We're just gonna go ahead and wiggle it on down into this manifold, make sure it seats, and then tighten that up. That is a very important sensor. Nothing's gonna run right if you don't get that in there. Okay, that sensor's plugged in. Christmas tree. Gotta torque some stuff. There should be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of these 12 millimeters, the torque. 23 Newton meters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is tight. This is back in. I did have to take this off earlier, but that's back in. Map sensor's plugged in. Our evap is plugged in. Our brake booster, very important, is hooked back up. Our PCV's back in, and that's it. I am going to reconnect my air cleaner clamps. Now, be cautious when you start this up, because if you have any vacuum leaks on this side of the throttle body, it's just going to go wide open throttle. So let's see how she see if she starts up and runs all right. There's a chance I'm gonna have to clear the codes if it had any, but hopefully it didn't. So I'm gonna take it out for a quick test drive. I need to go to bed. I gotta wake up early in the morning. I'm gonna go eat some food. But I will get you guys some video tomorrow of how this thing runs, and I will give you a full review, because super happy right now I'm able to drive this to work tomorrow. So fingers crossed it runs better after all of the changes, but we're gonna find out. I wanted to make this little quick update for you guys at the end of this video. I did get this manifold in, and I drove with it for a while. It is different, definitely changes the power band. The big thing that I noticed after I swapped and did all of this, obviously I knew this was probably gonna happen, but it lost a little bit of bottom end and it gained a little bit of top end, which, two things. One thing is that's a result of polishing the runners and opening them up. When you open it up, you slow down the charge velocity going into the intake. If you're not changing the length of the runners, then you're effectively going to lose bottom end. But I did increase flow. So what I'm doing today, and I want to show you guys real quick some parts that I made to lengthen the effective length of the runners, which is effectively an intake manifold spacer, or two of them rather. So let me show you guys what I made. So this is looking at the bottom of the original lower intake manifold. So these ports right here is where it attaches to the cylinder head, which is right there. So what I have done, and this is the new one that we just added. So I took this off, I created these. These are intake manifold spacer blocks. So basically they're just going to go in between the lower manifold and the cylinder head. I've got one for each side. I had to mill these. I milled them out of, I think it was 6061 aluminum. Fairly solid, hard aluminum. So I did some fancy math. There's a calculator online where you can calculate the runner length that an engine should want. This engine at 4,700 RPM, basically, which is what its stock torque peak is, wanted about 15 inches of runner length. I measured from the intake valves all the way up to the end of the plenum where the bell mouth is, and it's about 13 inches. So these are 1 inch thick pieces of aluminum. Hopefully that will, whenever you increase your runner length, you shift your power production lower in the RPM. That's why, if you think about it, you ever see like a big dragster, they've got very tall, long velocity stack runners because a lot of those engines, they make their power down low, whereas you see a motorcycle engine and the carburetors are like right on the cylinder head. They make their power up high. So it's all about working with the resonances and the frequencies of the engine to optimize the pulse that goes through the air when the intake valve, a lot of science stuff. Anyway, so I got these. I am going to, what I was able to do, so I just went and I bought some longer bolts. I actually ended up ordering another set of these gaskets, the lower manifold to cylinder head gaskets. Problem was, I bought them online. This is the part number, MS20316. It's by a company called Mala. It's a good company. They make really good engine parts. The problem is they put two of the same gasket in there. So I have two of these that have the hole for the EGR port. So I had to modify one of them, but it'll work, it'll seal. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick this together and see how this thing runs now. Okay, so this is what it's essentially gonna look like with the spacers that I made on there. The hard part is I couldn't find studs in the right length, and I didn't feel like going through with the hassle of making studs. So I've just replaced all the studs with bolts. So I'm gonna try to get this on here and started. But it looks like it's gonna work. Yeah, the EGR flows and everything. All right, we'll be right back. Okay, so there you have it. I've got all 9 of the bolts started. I am going to have to run them down while trying to hold some tension outward on the spacers. I want the spacers to, they are not perfectly port matched. I didn't get them perfect, but I want them to be as well matched to the cylinders as possible. But you can see them in there, actually in those cylinders right there. You can see the spacer that goes down into the cylinder. It does effectively create an S-curve rather than straight flow, so it's not perfect, but I'm gonna run these down and make sure that they don't bottom out before tightening down. I want to make sure that they can all tighten and that they're all tightened down and flush and everything, and then I'll go ahead and put the top back on it. Okay, so what you're going to want to do, I got some all thread that is metric. It is 100 millimeters long, so I'm going to put that in the very outward holes, and then I can slide our gasket spacer gasket combo right down on just like this. Like that. It just needs to be all the way down in the hole, and there we go. I'm going to do the other side, and then I'll put the lower manifold on. Alright guys, that's it. As you can tell, it really doesn't look that much different. It does look a little bit higher, but you don't really notice it. In fact, what I'm going to do, cool thing about this different manifold, the one from the MDX, is that it's still got two of the little balls that this thing attaches to. So if you don't like that beautiful magnesium manifold, you can just cover it up with this big weird Honda Earth Dreams bucket thing. It doesn't even say Earth Dreams on it, it just says Honda. So, just like that. But we're going to take it for a drive, let you guys be the judge. Alright guys, so obviously you can tell from that video that the 0 to 60 is basically the same. That only tells part of the story. Having had these on this truck for a while now. Now I'm able to run with it in fuel economy mode all the time, and it doesn't bother me. Before, it would drive me crazy because it would take so long to downshift, and it had to downshift to basically do any acceleration. I'm not seeing that anymore. I drive with it with the fuel economy mode on all the time. If you're towing things, if you're doing anything that needs you to have more torque, this definitely wakes it up on the bottom end as far as torque goes. If that's something that might interest you, let me know. I am trying right now to figure out a good, efficient way to make these plates. It took me an entire weekend with my mill. Once I come up with a good way to make them, I'm going to try to make a few sets and let some people test them out for, you know, a pretty cheap price, and then I might start selling them. It's really woken my truck up, and I'd like to try to share that with some other people. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Stay tuned, and we'll see you guys next time.